I'm going to answer chapter 24, number 3. We're given a model. We're to use the model to answer these questions. What is the monopolist profit maximizing level of output? Where do we find firms' profit maximizing level of output no matter what kind of firm it is? Where do firms produce? What level of output do they produce at when they're profit maximizing of any kind of firm? I'm building up some suspense. It's always the same. I've said it so many times on these videos. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So here is the model that's in the book, and it is drawn the neatest I've ever drawn a model, probably, which I'm deeply regretting because this is my second time recording this because I accidentally put number 4 up there when it's actually number 3. So happy I am to have spent so much time making a neat model when I have to redo the video. Anyway, so here we go. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost is where they intersect. That's right there. So that's where they intersect. The level of output, when asked that, we're talking about a quantity. What quantity is it where they intersect? It's right there, and I used 5K instead of 5,000 just to make sure I had plenty of room. So 5,000 units is the equilibrium profit maximizing level of output for this firm. Don't just know that the answer is 5,000. You need to know why. Well, how did we get there? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. It won't do you any good to know it's 5,000 if you don't know how to find 5,000 because the number's not always going to be that. It's going to be something different, but it will always be where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And by where, I mean the quantity. Then B is at the profit maximizing output rate. What is the average total cost and average revenue? Let me start with that average revenue. Average anything for what we're doing means divided by Q. The other part that we might be asked for, in this case average revenue, the R for revenue, that's what's in the top. So we're talking about the revenue divided by the Q. Well, it's total revenue, and average total revenue would be kind of redundant, so we don't say that. We just say average revenue. So we're talking about total revenue divided by the number of units, which is going to work in a full circle, I know that. But look, we're going to make 5,000 units because it's profit maximizing to do so. What can we get? What price can we charge for 5,000 units? Well, what people are willing to pay, which is what demand tells us. For 5,000 units along the demand curve, people are willing to pay $6. So that's what they're going to pay per unit. So our total revenue is what we can get, $6, times how much we're going to produce, 5,000. 6 times 5,000 is 30,000. Well, to undo that, to get average revenue, revenue per unit, you would just divide it by the number of units, since 30,000 divided by 5,000 is $6. We know that because we just multiplied them together to get there. In other words, average revenue is just the price. So average revenue is $6. And I hopefully just showed in the circulars going around why that is so. I hope. So that was average revenue. That was the second part of B. The average total cost, well, that's just along the cost curve. Along the cost curve, in the dollars part of it, for these 5,000 units, the dollars part tells us right here on this number scale that is dollars, they're $5 a unit, or cost per unit. That's what average total cost is cost per unit. So our average revenue per unit, or what we are making per unit, is price. We're making $6 a unit, but it's units costing us $5. How much are we making per unit in profit? $1. Times 5,000 units. What's our total profit? $1 times 5,000 is $5,000. Pretty sure. Well, let's look at the next question. At the profit maximizing, next two parts actually, not just the next question, C. Let's look at C and D. At the profit maximizing output rate, what are the monopolist's total costs and total revenue? Total revenue we explored already. That's 5,000 times $6. That's 30,000. Geometrically, it's this rectangle. This whole big rectangle here is total revenue. Well, what's total cost? Total cost is cost per unit times the number of units you're making. We know we're making 5,000 units. And our average total cost is a fancy way to say cost per unit. And that's $5. So $5 times 5,000 is 25,000. Or this rectangle. The area of the big rectangle minus the area of the small rectangle is this rectangle right here, which is, let me darken it. This rectangle that I've just darkened considerably, the borders, I don't want to fill it because we have more to do. This rectangle that I've just darkened considerably, the area of that represents our economic profit as a monopolist. That's total revenue minus total costs. Total revenue is 30,000, 6 times 5,000. Total cost is 5 times 5,000, 25,000. Those are the answers to B. C, no, I'm sorry, those are the answers to C. The answers to D, what is economic profit? It's the gap between them, or the area of this, which is $1 times 5,000, $5,000. $25,000 from $30,000 is $5,000, and $1 times $5 is also $5,000. So we have, in B, C, and D, we have two ways to get to the economic profit of the monopolist. I know you're excited about that. You can't get two ways to get an answer in your sociology class. I know you can't. Yes, that's recorded. You can show it to your sociology professor if you want to. Letter E. Suppose that the marginal cost and average total cost curves in the diagram also illustrate the horizontal summation of the firms in a perfectly competitive industry in the long run. What would the equilibrium price and output be if the market were perfectly competitive? Explain the economic cost to society of allowing the monopolist. So recall, I'm just going to do this very quickly, not anywhere near as neatly as this one, but the perfectly competitive firm in equilibrium, a single firm, I use a lowercase q unlike a capital Q because this is for the whole market, because a single firm is serving the whole market as a monopolist. As a perfectly competitive firm, that isn't so. So I use lowercase q. Average total cost is generally a parabola. The cost curves are the same across the types of firms. Marginal cost crosses this where at the minimum of average total cost. And in equilibrium, recall, the perfectly competitive firm faces a perfectly elastic demand curve because at the market price for the good, the buyers will buy as much as the single firm produces because there are many small firms with an indistinguishable product. So all three things, demand, marginal revenue, and price, are the same thing for the perfectly competitive firm. And that's where the individually perfectly competitive firm will produce to be profit maximizing, but they earn a zero economic profit. Zero economic profit. The monopolist, both of these guys or girls are producing at marginal revenue because marginal cost. That's where they are. That's where they are too. The monopolist, however, faces the entire market demand curve, and that's why there's a difference in their level of production from the minimum of average total cost to where they will produce to be profit maximizing. The perfectly competitive firm produces right at the minimum of average total cost, which means that good is being produced at the lowest cost to society. And if that's true for all of the firms, then the sum of their average total cost curves would be also produced at its minimum. Or put differently, going directly at the question that's asked, if this were a perfectly competitive industry with the downward sloping demand curve that the whole industry does face, individual firms don't, but the whole industry has a downward sloping demand curve. Maybe I'll circle back with an example of what I mean by that. If that were true, they would be producing here at the minimum of their average total cost curve, and they would be producing 8,000 units as an industry instead of 5,000 units as a monopolist. So society would be getting the additional 8,000 units. And the reason that this is an inefficiency or a deadweight loss is because we're not getting those units as a society. And what's more is we're willing to pay for the next unit above what is being produced to be produced. We would be willing to pay $6.99 for a little bit more to be made. Or even $6.95. I'm sorry, $5.95. I might have said 6. I'm sorry, but with what I just said, I meant just under 6. So I meant $5.99, $5.95, right on down to $4.50. We would be willing to pay to have more of these made. So if this was the sum of perfectly competitive firms producing, they would produce 8,000 units at $4.50 being the price, because that's what that's what we would be willing to pay for 8,000 units, and that is also at the minimum of average total cost. So we would be getting that produced at its most efficient level of production by doing it that way. Of course, there's some challenges to getting there. How do you break a monopoly into a large number of firms with easy entrance and easy exits producing an indistinguishable product? That's what we would be talking about. That's not so easy, and that would also, we're also assuming that the firms are producing at their profit maximizing rate and in equilibrium. Recall that if they're producing at a loss, if price is lower, firms would leave because the easy entrance, easy exit. If they're producing at an economic profit, firms would enter for the same possibility, easy entrance, easy exit. I call that the crab effect, remember? And so we could be in flux at any given time, not necessarily just sitting right where we theoretically would ideally be. And just to be clear, this firm faces this horizontal demand curve because perhaps this is a farm that produces wheat, a single farm. I didn't say weed, I said wheat. It sounded like weed, at least to me here by myself on my whiteboard, but I didn't mean that. That would probably take a few more years before that's an indistinguishable product. But wheat farmers are price takers. A single farmer can't affect price, but the demand curve for all wheat is downward sloping. So there is a downward sloping market demand curve for wheat, but a single farmer faces this because the grain company will buy all that they can produce, a single farmer, at the market price. That doesn't mean that we, the consumers of wheat, don't have a downward sloping demand curve. It's just that the market is so large that a single producer cannot affect the price by flooding the market, remember, or by reducing production. There are just too many small producers for that to be so. So that's the answer. Just to be clear on the last part, the inefficiency or the loss to society is the reduced production down to 5,000, and that is at the difference between the market price of $6 here and the $3 that is marginal cost, because we would be willing to pay for the next unit to be produced, and the next unit to be produced, and the next unit to be produced, and the next unit to be produced, right to there. So that's the gap, and that's the width. That's why that area right there is this area. This triangle, generally, it might not be a perfectly straight line, is the deadweight loss, or the inefficiency of monopoly. So hopefully I've answered the heck out of this question. I hope you find it useful.